Alright, today we're going to be proving triangles are congruent by the side-side-side congruence postulate. First, we need to know what the side-side-side congruence postulate is about. We always refer to this as the SSS congruence postulate as well. So what's happening is you're going to have two triangles, okay? And if all three sides of one triangle are equal to three sides of a second triangle, then that means our triangles are congruent to each other, or they're equal to each other, okay, in side lengths. So the way we would see this is we're going to have two triangles. And remember in our previous video we were talking about how we mark sides to show that they are the same length. So for example, this side is matching up with this side because they have the same length. This side that has 2 marks matches up with the one that has 2 marks here. That means these two have the same length. And then this side here has 3 marks and it matches up with the guy that has 3 marks. So these are the same length, okay? So if you have one triangle who has sides that match up with a second triangle, then those two triangles would be considered congruent triangles. So the way we state this is, we know that we're using the side-side-side congruence postulate. So I like to write SSS so that I know what I'm looking for. So for the first side, I know I'm going to start with side SR, okay? Or RS, I'm sorry, I'm going in alphabetical order. So RS is congruent to, since I'm going from the bottom up, closest to the 3, okay? Then I have to do the same thing here, the one that's closest to the 3 marks, then AB will be the side that's congruent. Remember, order matters here. If this is backwards, then this would be incorrect. For the next side, side ST is congruent with side BC, and then side TR is congruent to side CA. And then we use these 3 dots to say, therefore, triangle RST is congruent to triangle ABC by side-side-side, okay? So it's going to be very straightforward. We're trying to prove that those two triangles are congruent by side-side-side. So before we move on though, I need to drop some facts. First, we're going to talk about vertical angles. And vertical angles are angles where two triangles are touching, like by one vertex. And this angle in here will always be the same measure as this angle here. These guys are called vertical angles, okay? Those will always be congruent, no matter what. The same when we have two triangles and they're sharing a side. The side they share is actually, if I were to pull these apart, then they would be sharing the same side length. So it would be like me having these two triangles here like this. And remember, mine is highlighted in pink. So if I were to split them up, we can see that we're sharing that same side length, okay? And that side is always congruent to itself by the reflexive property. Okay, so don't forget these two things are very important, especially when we start talking about side, and angle, side, angle. Okay? All right, let's get started. First, we're going to state if the two triangles are congruent, and if they are, we're going to state how we know. So remember, we're trying to use the side-side-side congruence postulate. So we're looking for sides marked, and hopefully they have a match on the other triangle. Okay? So I'm looking at my triangle here, and it looks like I have 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 marks, okay? So I'm looking at my second triangle, and it looks like it also has 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 marks, okay? In these situations with these types of problems, we don't get to add any symbols unless you have some facts. For example, you have vertical angles, or you have the reflexive property where they're sharing one of those sides. That's the only time you can actually add a symbol to your triangle or triangles. Okay, so it looks like, yes, this side matches this side matches that side, and that side matches that side. So I know I can use the side-side-side congruence postulate here. So I'm going to write it down, SSS, and we're going to write down the sides of the original triangle first, because it's just a little easier that way. So it's up to you how you want to do it. I like to start with the sides. I know that alphabetically is not going to be in order, but it's okay. So I'm going to go from one symbol to 2 symbols to 3 symbols. Okay, so I'm going to start with side BC, move on to side CA, and then move on to side AB. And now we're going to talk about what they are matching up or what they are congruent to. So side BC, I'm going from 1 to 2. So this triangle has to be read the same way, from 1 to 2. So that means that side BC is congruent to side EF. Then 2, side CA is congruent to side FD. And then the last segment is side DE. Okay, so now that I know that corresponding parts match up and are congruent, therefore I can state that triangle BCA is congruent to triangle EFD by side, side, side. Okay? Not bad, right? Okay, let's try a different one. So I'm looking at what the triangles are giving me. Okay, always look at the information given. Remember, I cannot mark anything on these triangles unless they are one of the 2 facts, vertical angles or a shared side, that it will always be congruent to itself. So it looks like here I'm given an angle and then nothing, and then I'm giving a side somewhere else. So does that follow my side, side, side congruence postulate? No, it really doesn't. So can I really say that these 2 triangles are congruent? No, not really. So it's okay if you don't have enough information, then you say not congruent. Okay? Don't force it. If the information is not there, you can't do anything but say they are not. Okay? So, and let's try one last one for this section. We have 2 triangles and, it looks like they are sharing a side. So what did we talk about? We said that because they are sharing that side is always going to be congruent to itself. Therefore, that's the only time I can actually add a mark to my figures. Okay? Now I check. If I look at this triangle, there's 1 mark, 2 marks, 3 marks on the sides. And if I cover this triangle, there's 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 marks on the sides. So can I prove by side, side, side that they are congruent? Of course. So I'm going to do that. Side, side, side. And again, I'm going to go in order. So if I cover this triangle, it's going to go 1 mark, 2 marks, 3 marks. Okay? So here we go. So I'm going to start with side QR, followed by side, I'm sorry, not QR, side QS. Let me erase that. QS, side SP, and then side PQ. Okay. Now we need to see what these pieces are congruent to. So side QS, again, we're looking for 1, 2, 3. So this one also has to be read 1, 2, 3. So it looks like I'm going 1, 2, 3. But this time I'm going to have to say side SQ. So side QS is congruent to side SQ. Side SP is congruent to side QR. And side PQ is congruent to side RS. Okay. Therefore, triangle QSP is congruent to triangle SQR by side, side, side. Okay? Not too bad, right? Okay. I'm just going to do a couple more, and these are just asking for different things. So, for this next example, it's asking us, well, what additional information is required in order for us to know that these triangles are congruent for the reason given? So we're looking at the triangles, and they're asking us to prove that these 2 triangles are congruent by side, side, side. That means that we have to have all 3 sides marked and all 3 sides matching the sides of another triangle. So what do we have? We have one mark, 2 mark, and in order for it to be side, 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 it needs to have 3 marks here. Okay? Now let's take a look at the other triangle just to make sure we have the same thing going here. So I have 1 mark, I have 2 marks, and this would be 3 marks. So because it's asking to state what additional information is required, This is when I can mark my triangle to make it so that it's proven by SSS. So I'm going to mark these 3 lines for those 2 sections. So what additional information is required? Well, I know IH matches with FE. I know HG matches with ED. So what else did we need? Well, we needed side GI to be congruent to side DF. This is the missing piece in order for us to state that these are congruent by side, side, side. Remember, read your directions. It's asking you what additional information is required. Okay, it's not asking you to prove it. Okay, so let's try on this one. Okay, we want to prove by side, side, side. So you know some facts. Okay, see if you can pause the video and remember what that fact was. Remember, if we have 2 triangles and they're sharing a side, by default, we can mark this side as being congruent to itself. Notice that this time I used 2 marks because 1 mark was already used up. If I put 1 mark here, that would imply that this side, and this side are congruent to one another, and that's not the case. They're different lengths, okay? So I have 1 triangle, has 1 side, 1 mark, 2 marks. So I need for side, 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 this guy to have 3 marks. So the same time here, there's 1 mark, 2 mark. That means this guy has to have 3 marks as well, okay? Now because this is a fact, the only additional information that is required for us to prove by side, side, side is that this side is congruent to this side, okay? So again, I'm going in order, 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 mark. So that means side XW has to be congruent to, now we're going to do the same thing here, 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 mark, and now we follow that order, side XG. In this section, all you were doing was stating what additional information is required in order for those 2 triangles to be congruent by the side, side, side congruence postulate. That's all I have for you today. Until next time.